nature panel. And for everybody in the room, if you could introduce yourselves, and then we'll go online. So I'm Councillor Mary Jones, I'm the convener of this panel, and I'll go that way.
Liz Jordan, Scrutiny Officer.
And my name is Councillor Michael Locke. I represent Scrutiny.
Mark Wade, Director of Police.
Adrian Johnson, Team Leader, Pollution Control and Public Health.
Mally James, Senior Environmental Health Officer.
Good morning, Tom Price. I'm the Divisional Environmental Health Officer for Pollution, Private Sector Housing and Building Control.
Carol Morgan, Head of Housing and Public Health.
Councillor Andrew Lewis, Joint Deputy Leader, Swansea Council.
Councillor Andrew Stevens, Cabinet Member for Environment and Infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. And we'll go around my screen. Will.
Thanks. Councillor Will Thomas, representing Mumbles. Thank you.
Chris.
Councillor Chris Evans, representing Males Ward.
Jess, sorry, I couldn't see your name, it's so small.
Okay, Councillor Jess Pritchard from Mynydd
Bridget.
Thank you. Bridget Rowlands, Councillor for Clydach Ward.
Sarah.
Morning. Councillor Sarah Keaton for West Cross Ward.
And I think we have the officer, Mike, is it?
Yes, good morning. Mike Sweeney, Team Leader, Flood Risk Management in Swansea.
And finally, sorry, Stuart.
Stuart Davis, Head of Highways and Transportation. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sure everybody knows who everybody is now. We've all properly forgotten, so we'll carry on and hope for the best. Okay, so the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
We've received apologies, Chair, excuse me, from Cabinet Member David Hopkins and Officer Jeff Bacon.
Okay, thank you. And the next item on the agenda is disclosures of personal and prejudicial interest. Councillors, anyone? Officers? Okay. The next item is prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. And then the next item is minutes of the previous meeting, which is on page 1, page 2, and page 3. Do you all agree there? Those of us that were there? The correct record? Thank you. And then the next item is letters. We have a very long piece of information about public electrical vehicle charging provision. And the man is sitting in a car looking at mine in Calais. He hadn't moved for 20 minutes when I was there. Don't know what he's doing, but we're getting there slowly. Okay. And it was a very in-depth letter. And we also had the letter on the suitability of properties. So I'm trying to get to the main part of the agenda. There's so many parts to these letters. I hope everybody's read them because there's a lot of responses there. Okay, right. The next item is public question time, and to date we didn't have any public questions. So the next item is the asset management strategy in terms of decarbonisation, and I take it, Andrew, you're going to lead on this. Okay, it's over to you. Thank you, Andrew.
Yes, thank you. So obviously members of the committee have had the report to read through. So essentially what we try and do year on year is apply for funding to retrofit our existing public buildings. We've been quite successful to date, in fairness to the team. They're a small team, but they've achieved quite a lot in terms of putting solar on schools and the Glenvivian, for example, and this building, the Guildhall, actually. So we continue to apply for that funding and we've got a very close working relationship with the organisation that handles that for us. But obviously we need to consider the condition of buildings in terms of suitability for solar and also the orientation of the buildings as well. But we continue to apply for funding as much as we can and to accelerate that programme wherever possible, and probably should declare an interest actually, because I am the one of the directors of the Swansea Community Energy and Enterprise Scheme, shortly known as SKIS, who've also done a number of roofs on our schools in terms of solar installation. The benefit of that as well, actually, which is unseen generally, is that the generation from those panels is also recorded on a monitor in the school, and the children take a great deal of interest in the monitoring the progress of the energy that's generated. So it's actually providing an educational tool as well, which is a nice side benefit to this, as well as giving cleaner, greener energy to those buildings as well. So I'll pause there, Chair. I'm happy to try and take any questions, but I think I'm alone today without officers, so I'll do my best.
Thank you very much. Right, so the first question is from Councillor Locke.
Chair, if I could invite Councillor Stevens to answer
Can't
that, because
hear
it's his
anything.
portfolio.
Sorry, I couldn't hear any of that.
I thought I'll do it again. I didn't have the microphone on. The lights are out on Fabian Way and lots out on Members Road. Is this part of the programme for changing to LED lighting? What is the timeline for the programme?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Locke. I know the team are aware of some street lighting outages in that area, and they are dealing with the issues. So LED lighting has been installed, and the current programme is due for completion in August 25. So.
Okay, you happy with that?
Yes, that's fine, thank you.
The second question is mine, and it's on page 20 in that little box. And it's quite a simple little question, really. In the diagram on page 20 under fleet and mobile equipment, it mentions decarbonised grey fleet travel. What is grey fleet travel, please?
Yeah, so we have a distinction between the actual council fleet, which are council-owned vehicles, but we recognise that a substantial amount of our workforce have their own car and travel using their own car, and that is referred to as the grey fleet in the council. So I hope you can appreciate the challenges of trying to green the grey fleet are quite substantial, but what we try and do, for example, we offer a salary sacrifice scheme where people can purchase an electric vehicle, and we're also looking, as I think I've mentioned in a previous committee, that the fleet charging pillars here actually at the Guildhall and other depots, we're looking at software so that the grey fleet can use that infrastructure to charge their electric vehicles when they're using this as their base. So a very big challenge, because obviously changing your vehicle is quite expensive, but we try and encourage through engagement with our staff to encourage them to go green if they possibly can.
Thank you very much. Anybody else want to add to that? Anybody at home? Online, I should say. Okay, so the next question again was mine, but we have a working group starting in May about trees. So I propose that I can ask my question as I'm on the working group. In that actual working group, it would probably be the best place for it, if everybody's in agreement. And the next question then is from Councillor Chris Evans.
Good morning. Let's have a look. So we passed a resolution a little while ago for a commemorative forest, and I've not heard anything back on it since. I was just wondering how that was progressing.
Right, Councillor Lewis, I should call you that.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Evans for the question. Just mindful that this question sits in Councillor Anderson's portfolio. So if Councillor Evans is happy, perhaps Councillor Anderson could give a written response, or perhaps it could go to the tree working group in May.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Which would you prefer, a written answer or for it to go to the tree working group?
It's probably best for a written answer, just in case it gets missed in the other one.
I don't think it'll get missed, but yes, okay, we'll get a written answer. Okay, thank you. And the next question is yours as well.
I think I've got quite a few. So grid baseload for electricity production is expected to be around 30% fossil fuels by 2030. I was wondering, how can we achieve net zero when we have electricity still coming in via the grid?
So yes.
Again, thank you, Councillor Evans, for the question. Yes, so we purchase our energy and our electricity through Crown Commercial Services, and 100% of our electricity requirements are purchased from the Welsh renewable generated sources. And if I can direct Councillor Evans to our update on Swansea Council's progress towards achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030, which obviously rolls off the tongue, which was presented to Cabinet on the 12th of December, where it's referenced there.
Okay.
And the next question is also from you, Councillor Evans.
Yeah, that answer will probably cover the next question as well, to be fair.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is mine, and it looks a bit silly the way it's written down there. On page 22, there's a little paragraph about natural gas, and you've answered a little bit about the electricity. But what is natural gas and what is green gas? What are we using to say which is which? Because 1 minute we're purchasing green gas, but we're actually got natural gas through the Crown Commercial Services. So can you please give a bit of a better explanation of the paragraph?
Yeah, absolutely. So green gas or biomethane is a product from the recycling of natural waste, such as plant material or organic waste. It offers a desirable alternative to natural gas as it reduces the need for fossil fuels and cuts down on the harmful green gas being released into the atmosphere. There is an option under the Crown Commercial Service Energy Procurement Contract to purchase green gas. However, the issue is the cost premium on top of the normal natural gas unit rate, and also its availability. So in addition, the council would not be able to claim any offset as a consequence of Welsh Government guidance.
Thank you. So that's the paragraph about them changing their current position on the issue. Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, we're back to Councillor Evans, who's, I think, just going to contradict something you've just said, looking at the question.
Yeah, that's it. It's just that green gas isn't actually green. It's still releasing carbon. It's also releasing methane. Methane is about 10 times worse than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. The only difference is it just stays in the atmosphere for a much shorter period. So I was going to ask, are we looking to switch from gas boilers to actual sort of renewable ways of generating heat?
So as I referenced previously regarding our carbon reduction retrofit programme and our contract, we are implementing an ambitious decarbonisation programme across our public sector buildings. Additional funding is obviously needed, and all finance and grant options will continue to be explored so that we can put renewables on our buildings and move away from gas boilers in the future and look at green renewable energy generation as the alternative wherever we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to come in? No? Right, we're going again to Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I think it's going to be similar to the last one, but it's just to ask if there's any schemes going ahead with insulation, including updating the glazing to properly insulate the estates as an energy saving measure. And do we have any examples of it going on at the moment or in the coming year?
Yes, so if I can comment on the carbon reduction retrofit framework again, which is a key strategic approach towards the decarbonisation of our public sector buildings. Working with our appointed service provider, a range of energy conservation measures are identified for investment. For example, LED lighting upgrades, building fabric improvements, and installation of renewable technologies. In terms of our council homes, we are always looking at the enveloping of the building and insulation as measures, and we do look at window replacement schemes as well. The way that we look at it is if we can reduce the demand for energy, then that's also an important piece of the jigsaw in terms of reducing carbon. So yes, we're looking at that. And we've also got on the horizon Welsh Housing Quality Standard 2023. However, I have mentioned in many meetings, there's a high price tag for us to reach the EPC ratings that requires. And we're looking at around £900 million in Swansea alone. And so obviously if funding is made available, we will invest in that. However, we do need to be mindful that we've also got a homelessness crisis. And so we have to pick our priorities very carefully because we only have one pot of funding. So we are keeping an eye on that, and wherever we possibly can, we're also applying for optimised retrofit programme funding as well, the ORP funding, which is very much focused on improving the energy efficiency of our council homes as well.
Sarah. Thank you.
Morning, councillor. Are you finding the costs of the renewable fittings as we're going along with this becoming less expensive? Or is it a case of each time there's something newer and more effective and you keep having to renew and do more modern things, and that costs more money, is the first question. And the second is when you're dealing with the food waste, which we do, you're going to get green gas, aren't you, naturally from that? So we've got to deal with that. And the methane, it's just, is there a more effective way of dealing with it that we can use the green gas without and use the methane for something? I'm sure somebody was doing something with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Keaton, for the question. Unusually, actually, renewable technology is going up in price at the moment. So there is an aside, there's a scheme which is design templates for new homes that we're looking at joining forces with housing associations and other councils to look at this design template so that we are all purchasing the same thing, heading in the same direction, giving certainty to the local supply chain. And I think there's absolute merit in us doing the same when we're purchasing the renewable technologies and using our combined buying power through economies of scale to hopefully bring those costs down. So we'll keep a close track on that, and when appropriate, we can come back to the committee with an update on that. And in terms of the methane and the use of that, again, that's probably a question best directed at Councillor Cyril Anderson. And I'm not sure if perhaps we could ask through the administration of this committee to ask Cyril to provide a written response on methane. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we're back. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stevens.
Can I just add to that as well, as just as seen as food waste was mentioned, in terms of like one way around the cutting is to encourage and educate really the our communities and the general public on the benefits of reducing food waste at source as well. You know, so I just wanted to throw that one in anyway.
Thank you. Okay, so we're back to Councillor Chris Evans again for question 9.
Yep, it was just that we'd probably like to see something in the planning regulations going forward on installation, something like a minimum standard that has to be achieved. Would this be a possibility?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Evans. Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yeah, this actually sits better with building regulations as opposed to planning regulations. And of course, Welsh Government set building regulations. So that would probably be a question for them. But I don't disagree with the point that you're making. I think it would be good to include that in building regulations. Absolutely.
Thank you. We're over on question 10, Councillor Evans.
That one's already been covered by a previous answer.
So it's me this time then.
Yeah.
We know the use of air source heat pumps is very, very expensive for an individual dwelling. How are we progressing for council buildings, and have you hit the same snag as we've just mentioned then? If we are using them, how are you managing the funding?
Yeah, thank you. So the transition away from burning fossil fuels for space heating and hot water to heat pump systems, we are prioritising corporate buildings which are still on oil. That's our key approach. And under the carbon reduction retrofit contract, the service provider will be undertaking high-level appraisal surveys, providing decarbonisation options and capital costs. However, the installation of a heat pump requires a whole building approach. And so it requires significant capital investment to do that. So Welsh Government have provided grant funding for all local authorities to support the implementation of such schemes. And section 6.4 of this report provides an overview of a successful grant award for an air source heat pump project at Corporate Building Services, Hela Gorse, for completion in March this year. And we're identifying future funding and grants, which is obviously imperative in order for us to meet this objective.
Thank you. I did actually see a programme on television about domestic airs. It was £20,000 in one house. Where do they think people are going to get money like that? If they're encouraging people, they need to put money up. Not everybody can get a grant, you know. So I think it's something that's a long way down the line. Right, okay. We have the last question then from Councillor Locke.
Right, I think it's probably been answered, but in the report it states we are supposed to be decarbonised by 2030. Are we on track?
It's a good question. Again, I refer you to the update on Swansea Council's progress towards achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2030 report, which came to Cabinet on the 12th of December. However, I will add that it is obviously going to be a significant challenge for us. And there's a lot associated with the dependence on more grants, more finance and resource given to all councils, because I know many councils have set this target, but we continue to strive to achieve it in 2030 and monitor progress closely, but very much grant dependent, and we need the finance to be able to achieve it. I think I have to stress that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Do you know, this started 12, 14 years ago, you know, looking at council buildings, and we're still struggling now because of funding. You know, it's we've been told to do these things, but we just can't do them if we haven't got the funding. I said it was a long time ago. I know I was in the cabinet at the time, and it was first mentioned. We were working with the Environment Centre, and we didn't realise, I don't think, the sheer scale of having to do this. And of course, 2030 was a long way away. Now, of course, it's not so far away. So I do wish you luck. Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, I believe we've been monitoring our carbon reduction and our emissions since around 2008. So we have been on this journey for a very long time, and we have made significant progress in that time, but we still have quite a way to go. So, you know, we can't underestimate the challenge that's before us.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just a question around the investment in decarbonisation in schools, really, and how that is how that's chosen and which schools are chosen and why. Obviously, our schools sort of portfolio is quite wide, from a number of sort of Victorian schools, and you know, we've got obviously some modern schools which are being included in the programme, which is great. So I'm just wondering how the order of those is chosen, because obviously it can really help a school with their turnover, I suppose, because if they're saving a lot of money on energy, then there's more money to spend in the classroom. So I'm just wondering if the council looks at, for example, which schools are flying close to the wind, we say, and tries to help them out. I have got another question afterwards, but yeah, just that one first, please.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Thomas. It is quite a symbiotic relationship with the school, because this is a decision which is taken under the delegated powers that schools have. But also we have to factor in the suitability, for example, the orientation of the school, the stability of the roof infrastructure, because you can't put solar on a roof which is in need of repair, for example. That would be a bad move in terms of having to remove the solar again to fix the roof and then put it back on. So the schools are chosen in terms of their suitability, in terms of the infrastructure that's there. But then there's also a conversation with the school to see if, under delegated powers, that they want those renewable technologies. So we continue with the programme and continue trying to promote this as much as possible with our schools. But as you say, there's also more modern schools and new schools being built, so they have to be factored in. So, for example, if we were looking at a short-term future for a school because a new school was being built, then it wouldn't make good sense to put renewable technologies on the old school because a new school was in the programme. So there's many factors is the honest answer.
And you had another question, Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, thanks. If would it be possible to, I know I'm probably asking for something that's probably quite a lot of work, so if it is, then feel free to say no, but would it be possible to get a list of what schools have received green energy infrastructure funding as well, please?
I'm not sure that that's a difficult ask. I think we can combine that list for you and provide that quite easily through the phases of the retrofit, the refit programme that we have, and also the skis delivery programme. So I will ask officers to provide a written response on that.
That's great, thanks. And just a yearly question about the sort of miniature hydro that I always bring up. I know we've looked to identify something inside the county's boundaries for mini hydro. Just wondering if anything had ever progressed on that. Thanks.
Yeah, that was asked at a previous committee to Jeff Bacon, I believe, and he said that he was looking at it. I don't have an update for committee today, but I'm sure we can provide that at a future panel.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I hold my hand up. Two of the schools I'm associated with haven't got solar, but for the simple reason, one, I think the roof has now been completed, and the other roof wasn't sound. So, as you said, they were probably both schools. The orientation is good, but the states of the roofs weren't. So, hopefully, we're working towards it. There we are. Okay. So, has anybody else got any other questions, or indeed the questioners we've already had have any more questions for Councillor Lewis on the decarbonisation? Okay, no, well, thank you very much. I think you're staying for the meeting, or are you going? You're leaving quickly before we look at some more. Well, thank you very much, because you did have a lot of questions and we have had a lot of answers. Thank you very much. Right, so the next item on the agenda then is the Local Flood Risk Management Annual Update. And I know Mike is online. Yes, he's there. Okay, so who's going to lead on this? Is it you, Councillor Stevens?
I'll give a brief introduction, Chair, and I'll hand over to the technical expertise of Mike. No, well, maybe he's asked a few questions. Yeah, so the report just gives an update on Swansea's local flood risk management strategy. It highlights the ongoing work to protect our communities from flooding. It covers actions to reduce flood risk, maintain key infrastructure, and prepare effectively for severe weather events. I would like to put on record, Chair, my thanks to Mike Sweeney and the wider Highways team for their hard work in pulling together the report and the day-to-day work that they do across the county. They've got an ongoing commitment to managing the flood risk, and I think they're doing an excellent job given the severe weather events that we have been having. So I also welcome views and the input of the scrutiny panel as well in this, Chair, and so without further ado, I'll pass over to yourself or over to Mike if you want to give a technical intro. Thank you.
Mike, are you coming in, or should we ask the questions first?
It's up to you, Chair, to be honest. I wouldn't mind going and sort of introducing what the key activities are going on at the moment in flood risk management. So if you're okay with that, I'd like to inform the panel that of the work which is a key activity which we consider needs a bit of comment regarding, and that is at the moment we are in the process of completing a local flood risk management strategy. It's a statutory duty, and it'll set out how we in Swansea manage flooding within the city. And the new flood risk management strategy will incorporate, which is a bit different from last time, it will incorporate a flood action plan, and it will set out how we will be managing flood risk within our communities for Swansea. So I just want to mention that this strategy is very important. It sets a scene out how we manage our expectations of flooding. It'll set out what we are responsible for and how we work with our partners. But more importantly, it'll give an opportunity now as we go to public consultation for members to comment on the areas of concern within their wards. So we would welcome comments when we go for consultation on whether we have captured the communities most affected within the wards, and so we can sort of include that in our action plan. Yeah, so that's a key element of this report. Basically, last time back in 2015, we produced a flood risk management plan, which sort of which was ward based. But this time, and being consistent with other authorities in Wales, we are introducing catchment areas. So have chosen 6 strategic flood risk areas in Swansea, which are shown on the plan within the report. So what we will be seeking are views of whether or not we have captured areas of significant risk, and this is where the consultation will be beneficial, so that we can include in our action plan and to put actions and measures within there to take forward to reduce risk to our communities. So that's an important key activity going on at the moment. We're also continuing our role to seek funding for major issues in Swansea, and in effect reliant in some cases with Welsh Government grant funding streams. We also have a capital drainage budget where we maintain our highway drainage systems and enable us to carry out minor drainage works, and so we have a capital budget to do that as well. And then going on to the rest of the report, obviously the SAB function is an important role we undertake at the moment. The SAB sustainable drainage systems for new developments, we consent to the drainage strategies and ensure that flood risk is not increased as a result of new developments. And in doing this, we work closely with our colleagues in planning to ensure that we are aligned with our processes. Operational update, we have additional funding for increasing our facilities for cleaning gullies out and drains, and we can be more reactive then to complaints when they are actually received. So that's the basis of the report, but obviously that's just an overview really. So yeah, welcome any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much for that update. And our first question is from Councillor Michael Locke.
Right, my question is, at the culvert under Members Road by Black Pill, has a camera been put down to check if it is partially blocked? Also, what progress has been made on replacing the culvert with one where the capacity is greater? Thank you.
Are you answering that, Mike?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Locke, for the question. Yeah, I think we've worked with residents down in Blackpill as well who've asked the same question, and since the winter storm events, we have actually engaged a contractor to enter the culvert to check on its condition. And obviously what we found, the findings were that the flows were freely discharging onto the beach, so we're quite happy in its current condition. In terms of the scheme itself and the proposal to replace the culvert, the scheme is quite complex. It's one of these schemes that will need Welsh Government support. The stage where we're at the moment is that the storm events during September and December last year have raised some concerns. So the design has to be a sort of minor amendments are needed to the design. So effectively, the grant application now will be submitted to Welsh Government later on this year, following minor adjustments to the design and the completion of the full tender documents.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
We're back to Councillor Evans, and you've got 3. Do you want to go from 1, 2 and 3 without we keep calling you in?
Yeah, might as well. First of all, a big thanks to Mike and the team for all the hard work helped me out down in Blackpill. It was nice to see the team out this morning on Mumbles Road. Do we know what the latest is on TAN 15?
Like, if you just carry on answering.
Yes. Obviously, it's TAN 15. I've been informed this week now that from our colleagues in planning that the introduction of the new TAN 15 will be 31st of March 2025, so not far off really. So so that's when it's been introduced.
The other thing is whether it will increase your workload based on responding to planning consultations, but do you know to what extent it'll offset work for the operational teams by preventing unsuitable development?
It's a good question, Councillor Evans. In fact, that until TAN 15 is published, we don't know the exact impacts we'll have with this. I imagine it would increase consultations and that sort of advice we give to our colleagues in planning. And then when we look at preventing unsuitable developments, the new TAN 15 will place the onus on the local planning authority to justify developments using the new flood maps for planning, which considers the effects of climate change over the next century. This will mean that LDPs must not allocate sites for new highly vulnerable development in high-risk areas, and obviously in other areas where development is allowed, then the planning office will have to take into account flood consequence assessments and to ensure that suitable flood mitigation measures are in place prior to informing future planning decisions.
Cool. And the last one from me then is, if appropriate funding isn't received from Welsh Government to properly fund our flood risk teams and protect homes and businesses, will we in the future have to abandon some areas as a result of lack of funding?
Yeah, it is going to be a challenge, but as lead local flood authority, the responsibility for managing communities most at risk of flooding in Swansea, we need to develop action plans in a way that it doesn't totally rely on funding. And some other approaches could be introduced where funding isn't available. And these approaches, like the softer approaches where we can support communities in terms of flood awareness, flood action plans, and providing advice to property resilience, increasing property resilience. We can obviously support communities in that way. And so obviously we can introduce, or we have introduced this year, a new initiative where councillors can apply for stock sandbags within their wards, and so that members of the public can pick up sandbags in advance of severe weather forecasts. So obviously a lot of major capital investment may be required, but sometimes it won't be available. So the softer measures will have to be considered, and we will support communities in that way.
So, thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor, oh, sorry, Councillor Stevens.
It's okay. Thanks for the detailed response from Mike. But just to add to that as well, additional funding has gone into the gully works and works with the drainage, with the gully sucking machines and things like that. So that we're doing a lot more. And this year, I think it's been a particularly wet. As you know, Chair, I'm a farmer, and I go by the weather anyway. This year's been a particularly wet winter. We have had some very cloudburst style rain that it's difficult for anyone to plan for in some of those cases. But the team do a lot of work goes on behind the scenes in what the teams are doing in checking and maintaining the high risk areas, the gullies, and a lot of proactive drainage clearance in advance of severe weather. We've got a rainfall prediction program, so they get a detailed account of the rainfall over the next week or what have you, and things can be amended around that. And it's touch wood, everything has gone. Not every, but it's gone very well this winter in terms of not having some of the severe impacts that we've had in the past. But
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Keaton.
Hi. Just wondering, Mike, what I usually find getting back to me from various council officers is the main problem is how fast or how slow it is to get the grant needed once you have an issue with an area and you know there's an issue. Getting the grant from the Welsh Assembly can be painfully slow and really puts a kibosh sometimes on getting stuff done fast enough and can cause more harm than good. So any suggestions for how we could speed that up?
I think, a lot of our grant processes, we comply with the system itself. They can be drawn out, but a lot of the studies we do or undertake are very complex studies, and they do take a lot of feasibility, sort of hydraulic design, sort of more of a catchment, but of scale of solution, perhaps. So they're not quick fixes. So in the interim, what we could do as local authorities support that community in providing good advice on how they can protect themselves as well, and take ownership of a flooding issue until such time the funding is made available. So I think, yes, we do recognise that the grant schemes do take a long time, but obviously in the meantime we should considering how we support the communities in a way that we can provide more resilience to their properties.
Oh, that's very diplomatically answered. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question that's not on the list. Just occurred to me while we were talking about TAN 15 and new buildings. And it's the thing I don't like, which are on all the newer planning applications, because I sit on plan, are these attenuation ponds. Are we happy that they're actually built, if that's the right word, to what they should be and not just a pond? I thought they had to be certain depth and they had to have certain size and things like that, because I find them quite dangerous when they're on these big estates where they're going to be small children. So are there any things that we can do that make them safer?
What we do when we approve these attenuation features or ponds, we ensure that they are constructed in accordance to best practice. That means it's got sort of a minimum depth attached to it and sort of gentle sloping banks to the ponds. And also we sort of request that these ponds have sort of fenced off to protect against entries to small children. So yeah, there are, our role is to ensure that what's built to serve the development is built in accordance to consistent standards, and I'm sure that's the way we need to do things to ensure that safety is paramount.
Who checks it?
We have a site inspector who goes out to inspect the sites to ensure that the ponds are built in accordance to the approved drawings. So we do have a site presence. And following the site construction, what you'll find with these ponds will be adopted by the authority in due course. And so we would manage the safety aspect of that as we go forward.
Thank you. That's something I've learnt today, and I've been sitting on planning, complaining about these ponds for quite a number of years. So I'm very reassured that we actually check. Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to thank the team really, because whenever I do report a drain that needs clearing, I have to say it's a lot quicker than it used to be, and they are pretty responsive, and I haven't had any missed ones when I've requested one for a long time. So that's obviously been a big improvement from, say, a number of years ago when I first started. So that's great. One thing we struggle with in Mumbles is because we've got the smaller back streets, we can't get the big machine down. And as I understand it, you might be able to shed some light on this, but you have to hire in a smaller unit that goes to blow out those drains. And we haven't got one in the authority, and we have to hire it in from Cardiff or somewhere. That's what I was told. So that's my first question. I do have another question, if I may, as well.
If it's all right, Councillor Thomas, I'll have to check on that with you and give you a written response on it. I'm not part of the operational team.
Yeah.
So I can confirm that and see what we do to sort of get access into these smaller streets. But
Okay.
I will come back to you. All right.
Thank you. Just if you, while you're following that up, if you could, have a look. It isn't a great situation at the moment. So
Yes.
if we could bring, look at improving that, because if it is only hired once a year, it's obviously not enough. Second question, I have, I don't really want to name the street on a recorded meeting, but I've got a number of constituents in a terrace that several years ago, their sort of lower ground floor, the houses should never really have been designed like that, but they were, and the lower ground floors all got flooded. We had a lot of meetings with the council and Welsh Water and with the highways officers at the time, and it was deemed that we couldn't we couldn't afford, I suppose, or couldn't do the improvements needed. And subsequently, about a year ago, they've all been flooded again, and 3 of them had to move out, and they've only just moved back in. So it is a real problem there, where the residents are obviously being massively affected. So I would appreciate if we could have a meeting sometime on that, if we may. I'm just wondering how you work through the work plan for jobs like that. Do they ever, is it just a question of funding, or do you have a work plan that you're sort of slowly trying to work through? Thanks.
Yeah, without knowing the location of the problem you're talking about, Councillor Thomas, I'm quite happy to meet you on site and discuss the concerns you have. But ultimately, what you find in these issues is that whether or not there's other authorities involved, like Welsh Water, I don't know, but let's have a chat about it on site and see where we can go with it.
Okay, thank you. It's my question now, and it's about the riparian landowners. And I notice in the actual local flood risk management strategy, you mention it. I saw it in the covering report, and I wondered how well we worked with the riparian landowners. It says about Network Rail, and do they share, very easily? But as you said, we've got other owners of land or property that are, farmers and that as well. How do we, work with them about any difficulties when things that are not supposed to enter the waterway actually enter the waterway?
Thank you, Chair. It's through the process of handling the complaint, really. We tend to be reactive with this type of work. Where we get issues on private land, we will go through the land registry to confirm land titles first, and then that will confirm the landowner. Then we go out and meet them to discuss issues and what we can do to resolve these issues. You know, so effectively it's more of a reactive piece of work by us, and we just go through the land registry to identify landowners and deal with them accordingly. We do have information shared with us by Welsh Water and Natural Resources Wales on their asset information. But with regards to National Network Rail, as you picked, that they've been mentioned, they do actually attend regional group meetings with us as Lead Local Flood Authority. And so we do get an insight of what they are responsible for, but we do have good contacts with them as well. So I hope that answers the questions.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much. And obviously, I had to be very parochial and ask about Calais, but you did email us, so I don't know
Yeah.
what to share. Okay, thank you. Does anybody else got any questions for Mike or Councillor Stevens? Anyone? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much for attending, and I'm sure we'll see you again quite soon.
Thank you, Chair.
The next item on the agenda is the air quality management, and unfortunately Councillor Hopkins isn't here, but I'm sure Tom is going to be an admirable replacement, or Carol, whoever's going to do the work. So over to you.
Thanks. I'll bring Tom in. We've got colleagues supporting us here, Mally and Adrian as well, who were introduced earlier. So it's just an annual update, which we do every year on the air quality, and then we can go through the questions, but Tom will lead on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I don't intend to sort of read through the report as such as you've all read it, but just the highlights really for you. Concentrations for the pollutants that we are required to sort of monitor for within the strategy are all going the right way. And we've had confirmation from Welsh Government on the annual progress report that was submitted for the 2023 data that we are compliant now for the required number of years for our air quality management area. So we are able to look at that revocation process. And that's something that we'll start sort of gathering data on this year. You know, a lot of work is done by the team. It's a small team as well, but you know, there's all the calibration work of all the fixed kit we've got. We've got non-continuous data, our diffusion tube network, which the team exchange over on a monthly basis. And then we're always looking and responding to planning applications, but we also sit on the relevant groups, not just the local authority, the Welsh Air Quality Forum, the pollution expert panel, but we're also involved in Welsh Government groups with the Clean Air Advisory Panel, looking at target settings and being able to feed in from the local authority perspective, not just for Swansea, but on behalf of Wales as well. And what's probably easier now is to turn it back to yourselves, to the committee, for any questions or anything that you want to ask around, any discussion that you feel you'd like.
Okay, thank you very much. The first question, you can tell who went to the pre-meeting, can't you, with all these questions? Councillor Evans.
Yeah, you've probably actually already sort of covered it in the introduction. So it was just given that the graphs show that we're within our targets for emissions. You know, are we now pushing for those targets to be made more stringent in the future so we can strive for continual improvement?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Evans. So Welsh Government sets the targets, sets the standards in Wales through regulation, linked to obviously the devolved power. Currently, the new Environment and Air Quality and Soundscapes Act has enabled the provision there for setting of a target for PM 2.5. So that's that smaller threshold of particle, which will get down sort of, well, will get into the alveoli of the lungs. So it's a much smaller inhalable fraction. We've got a PM10 standard. We will have a standard they're forecasting for January 2027 for PM 2.5. The Act also requires that there'll be a new target for another pollutant. Now that pollutant is likely to be ammonia or nitrogen dioxide, but we'll wait for Welsh Government to tell us about that. As far as stringent, making the concentrations of target more stringent. Welsh policy guidance already stipulates that we should have a twofold approach for local authorities when they're looking at assessment. That's one is achieving compliance with the national air quality objectives in specific hotspots, but also then to look at the wider public health exposure and trying to reduce exposure for the greatest public health benefit. So the process is embedded now. We do look at our areas. We do look at how we drive it down. Key area being there is no safe concentration per se. You have an annual mean concentration of NO2 of 40 micrograms per meter cubed. That doesn't mean that 39 is safe. So we are always looking and working at how we might further reduce exposure in our areas.
Excellent. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Mine, I think I spoke to you about this quite a while ago, so that's why I wanted to know, has the Clean Air Wales bill come in because of all the wood burners we seem to have, and they're just burning anything that they like?
Thank you, Councillor. There quite a lot in that sort of question there with what you're saying. So the bill itself, yes, that was laid in the Senate in 2023. That's what's led to the Environment, Air Quality and Soundscapes Act, which came into force in February last year. That has brought in the national target setting process, promoting awareness, promoting active travel, but also then the review requirements for the national strategy. It then it's laying the groundwork now for Welsh Government to look at the local air quality management duties, which a consultation has just closed at early March. And in that also is the work on smoke control areas. And that will sort of look at sale of fuel, but also it's an offence to have to emit smoke from a chimney in a smoke control area unless you have an authorised appliance or you're using an authorised fuel. The only smoke control areas in Swansea are currently on the east side in St Thomas. They were laid in the mid-80s. So there's work being done there, and there'll also then be work coming out on vehicle emissions and anti-idling campaigns. Welsh Government are working on that now. There will be a consultation coming through. And then also there's the stuff on soundscapes as well, which they've introduced in the Act. So there's a review there every 5-year cycle of reviewing the noise and soundscape action plans. So all that is now in through the regulation, through the Act. And the Act will then regulate how we are able to enforce and what we are required to do.
Thank you. It's a lot of work then. This was just me, I presume, me being a bit nosy. No, Councillor Locke, it's his ward actually. But I've often wondered, I thought we were measuring the air quality at the traffic lights on Vivian Road. I wondered why on earth did we put the monitoring station right by the Shell garage where people fill their fuel up and obviously you would get, well, I don't know, this is what I'm asking you. Does it give a skewed reading?
Another good question, Councillor. When it comes to siting monitoring kit, obviously there are two main types of kit that we can use. You can have that continuous monitoring kit like that unit that you've referenced there on in Scrutiny, and then non-continuous, the ones that we can change, the simple ones. So when we look at this sort of kit, we are driven by siting requirements. So you've got to have a certain field of unobstructed airflow to make sure that it's representative. You're then governed by, can you get power to it? Is it safe? It's not in a certain area for visibility splay or for accidents. And then we've also got to make sure we can get it high enough so that it doesn't get tampered with, because quite often kit can get damaged. So this equipment went in many years ago. It's a particulate analyzer, a PM10 unit. It provides what we refer to as indicative data because it's not a European MCerts referenced bit of kit. We do have that kit, but they come in enclosures with air conditioning, etc., etc. This is a cheaper bit of kit for us, but it's plus or minus 20% uncertainty of data, so we can trust it as being indicative. Given where it is, if we had it by the lights, it's not too far away for particulate travels. We know that. So concentrations will sort of go much greater distances than it would for nitrogen dioxide, for example. That drops off much quicker with distance from the curbside. So it is giving us a good indication of air quality in that area. We do have other areas, other units across the city, and we do other work. We're currently doing a Welsh Government Local Air Quality Support Fund project looking at sort of trying to work with wood burners and looking at gathering data around the use of wood burners. That's still a live study. So I will refrain from going into detail at the moment because I don't want to sort of confound any results there. But we are doing work around that, looking at the use of wood burners and how they're used and how we can interact with the users, and trying to get more information on the behaviour and the air quality literacy of people, so that we can use that to try and look at future interventions and how we can look at addressing some of the concerns around wood burning use and fuel use, which is always the key one for wood burners.
People seem to think with a wood burner, you can push in anything and it'll burn, almost like the coal fire you had years ago. People just threw anything on it and hoped it burnt. Now we've got all this wood that they get from builders and, you know, empty houses and things, and even where they're building near us, where they've been cutting trees, they just helping themselves to the fallen trees, but they don't seem to season them, they just use them.
That's certainly very, very similar to the information that we receive, but I am also aware that installers are required, as part of the HETAS fitting requirements, etc., they are required to educate the person on how to use fuel, best way of lighting, seasoning timber, and they do it. So it's a very, very difficult area to start looking at, and that's what Welsh Government are looking at with the consultation that's just closed. It's how you engage with the use of fuel and making people aware of the potential impacts if you don't season properly. So installers are a huge part of this process, to make sure we have good discussions with them, because they're the front line for us as a regulatory authority. We need to be considering, working together to make sure that the public are fully informed and do what's required.
This may be a silly question. Do they have to have a registered installer, or are we got some, you can go to somewhere and just buy one and put it in the grate,
So two processes. The primary route is through the registered installer. So very similar to having your windows or electrics, for example, you have a competent person scheme. However, if you don't use HETAS, which is the body, it will fall back to building control for building regulations. So you can't install it. You're not to install it without it being installed correctly to regulation.
Thank you. Councillor Locke.
Right. In the past, the pollution aesthetic costs has actually been very high. So currently, is the pollution much lower, or is the trend downwards?
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, we are seeing a downward trend. Primary pollutants for Scrutiny area, for why that air quality management area was declared, was nitrogen dioxide. So we have seen that concentrations have been declining over years. With the pollutants, we have to look at trends. You can't just go, oh, well, this year it's compliant, therefore we're okay. So what we are seeing, certainly pre-COVID, we were sort of in the regions of breaching that 40 micrograms per meter cubed, and we were starting to come down, and there were some amendments to the highway network, introducing the lights away from the roundabout, for example, by the church. But then COVID happened, and we saw a change in vehicle patterns. So we haven't included the COVID years within our assessment. They're always looked at as, right, well, we take those aside as an anomaly. Other work's been done to look at the impact of reduced travel. But we've then been looking at the data as we've come out of COVID in the recovery phase. And yes, we are seeing that downward trend. And we've been compliant now in Scrutiny for 5 years, at least 5 years. So we will be looking now at that next process of revocation in that area.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions from anyone on this subject? No? Well, thank you all very much for coming. Some of you have had a quieter morning than others, but thank you very much for your attendance, and obviously you're free to go. I'm sure you've got plenty of work to do on the farm. Well, don't have a wood burner unless you do it correctly. Right, so the next item on the agenda is the work plan. So, Mike. Right, sorry about that. Councillor Locke, that we'd quite finished. The next item on the agenda is the work plan, and obviously it's our May meeting, which is the last one of this council year. So we've got a climate, poor old Councillor Lewis is here all the time. Climate change update, and then the local nature recovery section 6 action plan, which is a really important plan, and we definitely need to have some feedback on that. And then we do the roundup for the achievement against corporate priorities for the year. Okay, the panel review is at the end. Okay, so thank you all very much for attending, and I'll see you on the 13th of May. Thank you.
Bye.